Right. Hello everybody, and a special hello to Vardeep Edwards. Vardeep, how is your week so far? It's midweek, it's Wednesday. Some say it's a midweek hump. How is it for you so far?
Yeah, hi Farzana. Thank you for having me on today. It's week is good so far. Back into the swing of things. I came back from holiday last week, back into work, so I'm back on track with where I need to be and back in work mode. So yeah, it's all good. Thanks.
Fantastic. Now, Vardeep, tell us. You're a member of the Asian Comms Network. How did you hear about the Asian Comms Network, and how has your experience been so far?
Yeah, I still think I'm fairly new. I mean, you've only been going for a year, so it is new anyway. But I've known Avita for a while. I've done some work for her in the past, so I've always kept in contact with her. And I was excited when I saw that you were setting up such a community, and I came along to a couple of your events. And yeah, it was different. It was different to all the other networking events that I've been to. I've come across quite a few and been to quite a few, but there was a different sort of connection I felt from the members in that community. So I joined a few months ago. So still quite new, still kind of getting to know some of the people. But I went to your 1 year anniversary last week, which is great to meet some of those faces as well. So yeah, that's how I got to know about it. Sorry, I can't hear you, Farzana.
There. So Vardeep, now, what do you do at the moment? Tell us about your day job.
So I call myself a branding specialist. My background's in design, so that's what I've done all my life. I did a short stint social media when I took a course and did that for a little while for some clients. But I then was finding out getting asked to do people's logos and visual identities, and it took me down this route of being more specialised within the branding space. And as I did more and more work on brand identities and some of the visual aspects, I realised there was this other bit missing prior to that, which is the strategic sort of foundation for that. So a lot of the work I do tends to still be very design focused in terms of the outcome, but I do also work on the positioning, the messaging, and sort of the route to kind of what that visual identity and that brand needs to look and sound like.
And Vardeep, in the background, I can see a book saying "The Branding Queen."
Yes.
So can we say you are our branding queen? Now, for those who don't know brand, because brand obviously is one of those adjacent areas to, say public relations, and and obviously we're not going to go there in terms of what that definition is, because it's quite far and wide ranging. Now, in terms of branding, for those who haven't come across brand people, how would you describe what a brand is, and also how does it sort of sit with PR and marketing?
So in terms of comparing it to sort of what marketing and PR does, I think branding is the bit that you have internally. So marketing and PR, I find, and even design is quite customer forward facing, but the brand sort of lives within, and it's about that story that only you can tell. And that feeds into design, marketing, and PR because it's unique to you, it's authentic, it's your key point of difference. And then it's also kind of how you're kind of packaging that perception, if you like, is that branding piece, so that then it helps to direct your messaging, who you need to get in front of, what your visuals need to look like, what story you need to be telling to be able to connect with the people that you want to get in front of. So it sort of feeds in, but I feel like it feeds throughout and sort of is quite iterative as well.
And Vardeep, would you say that branding is not just the visual element, but also the copy element? So does that also include the vision, mission, values, purpose, tagline, positioning statement? Because, sometimes when people think about branding, they just sometimes think about colors, logo, font, and perhaps some people's understanding of branding, which, my understanding before I started learning about it, it was quite reductive. I just thought it was just, how pretty does it look? So can you tell us a little bit about just what components you work on so that people understand the full picture of what brand development actually is?
Yeah, so it does encompass quite a lot of different elements, and the whole origin of branding is when the cows used to get branded, and then with the industrial revolution of terms of printing, products and needed to be designed to have a stamp that this was this particular organisation. So it's still got that sort of feel of like, what does it mean to be this particular business, organisation, or product or service? So it's come back to your question about what it encompasses. It is all of those things. So yeah, your mission, your vision, your values, your purpose, your point of difference, your positioning, who you're targeting, what you're offering, but also your brand personality as well. Then that feeds into your tone of voice, how you show up, what role you play in your end user's life as well. That feeds into your copy because it will relate to your story as well as potentially types of keywords and how your messaging needs to come across, because not everybody's message is going to be the same way everybody's visual identity is not going to be the same. So it's kind of this whole picture, and then it helps to feed into the outward facing things. So I think there's quite a lot of work that gets done beneath the surface. So I think that's why branding gets bandied with visual identity, because it's part of an education thing, I think, as well. But it's just that's the bit that everybody sees, and not necessarily all the work that goes before it.
So, Vardeep, branding is a very specialist area within the sort of comms arena. How did you discover it, and how did you sort of navigate towards this career? Did you know somebody in branding? A lot of sort of Asians, they often say that when they first entered into the industry, they just didn't have role models and they didn't have people in their family. And so, half the trouble is it's not so well known, the communications industry, all components of it within the Asian community. And therefore, I spend most of my time explaining what I do every time I meet my relatives. And so I just want to know, how did you stumble across this world of branding? And did you have any role models or any people that you came across in your formative years that opened that world up to you? How did you find this world?
So it was during my school years, actually. My aunt caught me doing homework, and I was drawing letter forms because I had a love for design even then, and drawing, that was my thing. And she suggested a career in graphic design. Never heard about it before. Looked into it and thought, yes, this is exactly what I want to be doing. It's just, is everything that I've got an interest in. In terms of role models in my family, my mum used to sort of design and make her own dresses. But in terms of creative careers, there was nobody else actually working in that type of field. So I didn't have any point of reference. And even when I did start working, there was no role models at all. There was nobody like me. Even all my tutors at university, even the studio heads and creative directors that I went on to work with, and the books and the people I would follow in the space, there was hardly any women, let alone anybody, any women of colour. So it's hard to know what impact that has, doesn't it? I think because I suppose looking back now, kind of later on in life, you kind of do wonder whether having sort of those role models or somebody in that sort of role, and they're also navigating where you might have come from, the personal sort of life as well, and what that means and what that could look like as a career path for you, might have given you a bit more of a steer. So it's hard to compare what I didn't know. So I think a lot of it is finding your feet, and has been. I still don't have many with my sort of wider family, who work in this sort of field. It's just not as a common career path for a lot of Asians in my family.
I wanted to talk a little bit about navigating promotions and seniority. And I imagine for some in the branding industry, they sort of start off in graphic design and then move on in sort of brand development and then sort of creative director. And with creative director, every time I've met a creative director, they always tend to follow a certain archetype. So they always tend to be a middle-aged white man, and they often have a beard, and they often have fantastic sort of black-rimmed glasses. And so I just thought it was really interesting. I've always come across them like that. And I wanted to know, is it hard to get that promotion from graphic designer, which is probably perceived as quite tactical, into actually a branding strategist? And often strategy and strategic thinking is often reserved for others, not quite for, and you had to navigate intersectionality. So you had to navigate gender. I mean, because I'm also a strategist, and I've had to spend, and also I think you've got ageism as well. So when you're younger and you're a strategic thinker, they just don't think that you could be a strategic thinker. And also, perhaps if you look a bit younger than you are, and you've got all those sort of layers. Talk us through, and especially for the audience who are trying to sort of figure out how can they get to the next level in your own career. How did you navigate that? The ability to go, from sort of like tactical to strategic and taking on a more senior role. What did you learn during that journey?
So there's a couple of points. I think it's interesting, not having seen people like me in those roles. I don't think, when I was younger, when I used to work in design studios, that I actually even entered my brain that could be a role for me. And I only think that now, really. I don't think I was even aware of, that being a potential path for me at that time. I've been working for myself now for several years. Like it's 2006 since I last quit my last full-time job. So, and part of that was I needed to leave the existing job because I needed a new challenge. And then later on in life, it's allowed me to have the flexibility around my family life. So I haven't kind of stepped back into the workplace into the traditional sense. So, but what I found that has allowed me to do is to level up in my own way and to kind of make my own career journey and my path into what I want to do, rather than that be sort of dictated to me. And I don't know how different that would have been had I stayed in an organisation or a design studio. It's not always very linear to get to the creative director, even when you used to work in design studios. I don't believe that even that you've been, I've got several friends who have worked in design studios. A lot of the ones who have got to that level have started their own studios and agencies rather than stay in the same place and then kind of, progress. So, it's a tricky one, isn't it? I think, and if I think back to some of the partners and directors, I think some of them have had their own agencies. So, I think in the creative space, it's slightly different to get to that sort of level rather than in a more traditional sort of corporate, perhaps there's more, there's steps or a pathway potentially.
And Vardeep, for those who are thinking about setting up their own consultancy, what advice would you give them? Because you've been well into your journey now, about 7 years with the Branding Fox.
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah. And so, so just for those people who are sort of thinking, should I branch out on my own? What's important for them to hear and learn from your journey?
I think you've got to be like 110% invested in it, because it's not the easy option. Not to say that working for somebody is an easy option either, but there will be days and times where you might question yourself or you might doubt. And when it's you as well, you have to sort of have the confidence and faith behind yourself. You have to back yourself quite a lot. So you have to show up. You have to do the work. So you've got to have that focus and that energy to do that as well. But also to just be aware that you've got the chance to build it how you want to build it, which is the element I like. I like that flexibility. It doesn't have to look like what somebody else is building. So I think it's a case of also being open-minded. The other thing I think is really key is that learning journey never stops. It doesn't matter how old you are or how many years experience you've got to be continuously learning. And I don't mean just your craft, but just learning in business in general, and keeping on top of like new innovations or tools ways of working that potentially come out. But also it's about, I think, it's relationships as well, and networking, and keeping those relationships over time, and building a support team or a support network of people that you can talk to and connect with and collaborate, or just have to talk about your own businesses.
You mentioned the importance of continuous learning, and there's always sort of this undercurrent of technological innovation that's happens in the comms industry. So you've got no choice but to kind of learn. With all of these new AI tools, has that made your job easier? Do you utilize AI tools? Or actually has it made it quite challenging because people can download an app and actually think that they can create a brand within I don't know, minutes. So how, is it friend or foe for you?
I don't know if there's kind of a very sort of split answer. I think it will probably kind of, the people who will use AI for their branding are either unsure what branding can really do for their business and organization, or it will be people who are not invested in the whole branding process and building that anyway. So that's okay if people want to use AI to do that. I use it? I mean, everybody uses it to some extent. I think sometimes it's quite good to collate notes and themes around, notes that I have, rather than reading through reams and reams, but also just as another opinion. I think what it can't replace for me is that thinking behind it. So even though it might be able to come up with supposedly straightaway answers, and I think this is the problem with AI, because you can ask it anything and it will come with an answer straight away. But the answer might not actually be relevant and might not be useful for you. You've kind of got to sift through it still. And I just think, especially the creative, thinking creatively, sometimes we kind of connect random things or random dots, or you'll see a pattern or something will jump out at you. I don't think AI can quite, not yet anyway, quite sort of do the same thing. So I'm not threatened by it by that sense, but I think it's definitely got a place because it's not going away, and it's finding how best to use it. If it's going to help save me time on something, then I think yes, that's an absolute bonus. Sometimes it might be something to sort of bounce off and just see what answers it gives you. That's also just another way of seeing the issue or the problem that you might be overlooking. I think sometimes that could, has valid points as well. So yeah, I don't know. I'm in the middle somewhere. I don't think that's quite answered your question, but I think you're on mute again, Farzana. Sorry.
It's always really funny listening to you talk about branding, because actually when I think about branding, I often think about how it shows up in the news cycle, and it's always usually there's some disaster behind it. Somebody somewhere chose to rebrand and got it wrong, and then there's this, and then they have to navigate this backlash, and then sometimes they have to sort of climb down and then go back to the original brand, because people can actually get quite emotionally invested into brands, and when you start tweaking even colors, and I think it was the the financial organization Aberdeen that sort of changed their sort of visual, their logo, and it really annoyed people. So can you think of like some instances that brands get it wrong, and why do they get it wrong? Because they're usually large organizations, Vardeep, so you kind of think it's not like they're giving the job to someone who doesn't know how to do branding. Why do some organizations get it wrong when they rebrand?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, isn't it? And the recent Jaguar case is a good example of that. And it really has torn people, because I think the whole point of their rebrand was that they need to stay relevant for the next 50 to 100 years. Therefore, their target audience is going to change. So who what are they going to be into in terms of a brand and a car like Jaguar? But they've just completely stripped any history. So I kind of see what they're doing, but also they've built all this equity in their brand, and this solid base of what they're known for, and that loyalty that people buy with them. And it's a trust factor as well. I think that's what happens with it. So on the surface, it might seem like it's the visuals or the logos, or have changed the colours, or whatever it might be. But actually, what you're doing is you've broken that trust with the people who trusted you, and they haven't listened and they haven't understood what that meant. So that's when there's that uproar. So there's another. So when you talk about the emotional side, absolutely, it's because we've got these kind of subconscious emotional connections with certain brands. Apple have got it. An Apple user will not even consider anyone else in the market, so they're not shopping for other phones or computers. They're only shopping for Apple. So yeah, people have kind of different ways of buying from those particular brands. So yeah, I don't think there's a straightforward answer in terms of why they get it wrong. Sometimes it's a shift in needing to target a different market, like Jaguar. Sometimes it's they've merged, so with another organisation. Therefore, something needs to happen in terms of what that new combined brand might be, or it might be that they've got a new leadership team or a new marketing team and directors, and they want to make their mark and a stamp. Or it's because this organisation's been going for 100 years and something needs to be shaken up to to change and stay modern and relevant. So yeah, it's a tricky one sometimes. Yeah,
I think you said something really insightful, because just because there's a backlash, it doesn't mean they've actually failed. It could just simply be that they are repositioning their brand. They understand what the future target audience is, which differs from the existing. And so therefore the backlash comes from the existing. And maybe actually that was their strategic thinking all along, that they're going to alienate their current position because they're turning to a totally different segment. So that's been really interesting. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Asian Comms Network. Now, first of all, you designed our logo. So just a huge thank you. Could you talk us through what you were thinking about that made you decide upon the colors, the style, just so that all of us who are part of the community, we can appreciate the thinking that went behind it?
Yeah, so I was quite conscious of the fact that I wanted to create something that represented what being Asian meant. And, and Asian is a continent in itself, so it's not just India, there's quite a few other countries. So I wanted to make sure that it was representative of that kind of feel or that emotional kind of take behind Asian comms. So it didn't feel like it was going to exclude anybody. And I was quite sort of, that was at the forefront of my mind in terms of the colours as well, and something that felt Eastern, but not to a particular country within Asia. So I was, quite sort of aware of making sure that it kind of encapsulated that. And so that kind of made me think about the blend of colours. So there's blends of like gradients within the designs, and it's focused on a few different colours, so it kind of brings that sort of fusion element to it as well. And then I wanted to bring in the comms, which is the sort of the apostrophe in the A, but also just to kind of give it a bit more of a polished look. So that then kind of chose the style of the typography, so it wasn't, it's not like a side thing that you are doing. It is something, and it represents the professionalism within this type of community. So yeah, it's a few different things that I wanted to try and translate with that.
Vardeep, you really are our branding queen. I wanted to just say a shout out to those who are sending some lovely messages in the comments. So Tarini Patel, lovely to hear from you. Advita, and we've also got Shinal and Nazia and Aruna. Aruna's the founder of the Asian Single Parents Network. Really interested to know about that, because Vardeep, I know that you've been also navigating the space of being a parent and running a business. So that's going to be an interesting conversation. Aruna, we would love to hear from you about what you're doing. Hassan, he is our OG, our first member. And Vishni, who I had the pleasure of sitting opposite last week at our 1-year birthday. So just so lovely to see everyone tuned in and saying hi. Vardeep, any last comments you've got to say about the Asian Communication Network for those people who aren't members and are thinking, should I join? Should I not? How is it different from other diversity networks? What's the value add for people who are already busy juggling perhaps family, caring, work, so forth?
Do you know what? It's finding people like you. I know it sounds a little bit cheesy, but I've been to quite a few, and even some that are focused on Asian. But what I've found is there's little that focus on the creative space within Asian businesses. And also, I'm not really a corporate type sort of person. I know that's, it might be obvious from being in a creative community, but it still has that level of professionalism. So sometimes it's hard to find networking groups that get the balance that's right for you. And I like the fact that there's quite a variety of different types of backgrounds from the members within your community. And yeah, there's just it's a good bunch of people to be able to connect with and talk to, who all understand where you're coming from as well. And I think that makes a big difference.
And Vardeep, we're coming to the end of our session. Is it okay if people wanted to reach out to you? They could reach out to you on LinkedIn. Is that send you a connection request from the community?
Absolutely.
And if they've got any questions about branding from our very own branding queen, please do reach out to Vardeep Edwards. She is on LinkedIn. Vardeep, are you also on any of the other channels? Or is
I'm
LinkedIn
on
your go-to?
LinkedIn's my go-to. I'm on Instagram as the Branding Fox, but yeah, either is fine.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again, Vardeep, and thank you everyone from the community for tuning in. And a big shout out to Advita, who behind the scenes is making sure the tech works. So thank you all. Take care.